Hello and welcome to the Electric School Bus Campaign's Legislative Breakdown. Today we're going to be talking about the New York City Council's attempt to amend the New York City Administrative Code Section 24-163.9, which deals with retrofitting of and age limitations on diesel fuel-powered school buses. What they are planning on doing is lowering the age limit from 16 years to 10, and also requiring the transition to electric school buses by 2040. I do want to point out that during the video I might refer to this proposal as Introduction Bill number 1428. That was the bill last year, but nothing has changed. Just the new introduction number was given for 455 for this year when it was introduced on February 14, 2008. But the content, as I said, is still the same. So let's jump into the bill and start by looking at the title of the bill, or proposed bill, actually. The title of the bill is pretty straightforward. It states a local law to amend the administrative code of the City of New York in relations to age limitations on school buses and replacing such school buses with all electric school buses. So it looks like the main things they're trying to do is to reduce the age of the diesel and other internal combustion school buses, how long they can be used on the road. Currently, the law allows 16 years. And they're going to move towards requiring all electric school buses in the near future. Before we actually take a look at the text of the proposed bill or local law, we're going to look at the bill summary. Now, the bill summary is not an official part of the law when it gets passed, but it is looked back on as legislative history, and it's a plain text version of what the law is trying to do. If anyone has read statutes before, they're not exactly known for their prose or ease of reading. Some people would probably say that they're made complicated on purpose, but the purpose of the bill summary is to make it a lot easier for the layperson who is not used to reading statutes to understand what the local law is trying to do, or the official bill or administrative code section when it actually gets passed. So this could be used also by the administrative agency to determine what they need to do to fill out the law if they're making rules and regulations as part of their enforcement duties. And the court will also look at it when there are legal challenges to determine which way to rule and what the intent, if it's not clear in the language of the statute, when they're making their decisions. But before I break down the bill summary and go through it piece by piece, let's read it as a whole and try to get a general context and feel of what this whole bill is trying to do. The local law amends Title 24 of the New York City Administrative Code, adding a new section, Section 24-163.9, subsection K, to require that commencing September 1st, 2020, all school buses subject to the New York City school bus contracts that do not use a closed crankcase ventilation system shall be electric vehicles. Electricity for such electric vehicles shall be generated on site. This local law further requires that all other school buses shall, after 10 years of use, be replaced by compressed natural gas, hybrid school buses, or all electric, and further provides that the use of such compressed natural gas or hybrid school buses is limited to 10 years, and such school buses must thereafter be replaced with all electric zero-emission school buses, and as long as the particulate matter emissions of all such school buses does not exceed emission levels permitted in the most recent diesel emission standards by the United States Environmental Protection Agency, and the mileage meets the most recent corporate average fuel economy standards for compact and large trucks. So the first part of the first sentence says, the local law amends Title 24 of the New York City Administrative Code. So the Administrative Code regulates all of the administrative agencies and tells them what their powers are and what they can do, and each administrative agency, such as Department of Sanitation, Police Department, Department of Buildings, Education, Department of Environmental Protection, has their own title, and there are a few other titles that deal with other rules and regulations of the city that aren't specific to one agency. But for this case, we're talking about Title 24. Now, the assumption would be Title 24 is probably deals with the Department of Education, but Title 24 is actually the section that talks about the rules and regulations for the Department of Environmental Protection. So even though we're dealing with school buses, which one would generally think of as under the purview of the Department of Education, this law is being looked at as a diesel emissions regulation and a clean air or environmental regulation, and not a regulation specifically on school buses and their operation in general. So the local law will be adding a new paragraph, paragraph K, to Chapter 163, Subchapter 9 of Title 24. A general overview of Chapter 163, it deals with all sorts of diesel regulations for vehicles both on and off-road. It also has the requirement to use ultra-low sulfur diesel fuel, and also has a provision regulating the idling of diesel-powered vehicles. And there's also a citizen suit provision under the idling regulation, which I plan on doing a video of, so that you can help to enforce these laws and maybe make a little bit of money. So stay tuned for that. Subchapter 9 of 163 deals with the retrofitting of best available technology and also age limitations on diesel fuel powered school buses. To require that commencing September 1st, 2020 is when this bill will actually take legal effect. And why they picked September 1st of 2020 is because schools in New York City open after Labor Day, which is the first Monday in September. Therefore, this bill will take effect for the school year beginning in 2020 to 2021. This language is very important. It says all school buses subject to New York City school bus contracts. It's important to know that New York City DOE does not own any school buses. All their school buses are contracted from private individuals, and the school buses that operate in New York are not all subject to New York City school bus contracts. The school bus that I actually use for my son to go to school is a private contract between me and the school bus operator. So that would mean that this law would not affect those school buses. This could mean that probably half or more of the school buses in operation in New York City would not be affected by this law. That is why, hopefully after I get a law passed in New York City, I can go to the state and get a law passed so that we can affect all school buses, not just in New York City, but throughout the whole state. I'm still doing a little bit of research on this, but I think that this law could be expanded to capture all the school buses within New York City by City Council, because the idling regulations do affect all diesel vehicles that operate within the city boundaries. But it looks like DEC, or New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, has overall authority on school buses, and we're using our contract power to affect these school buses that work with the Department of Education. Well, we wouldn't have power over the school buses if we're superseded by the laws of DEC. But this is something to look into, and hopefully we can expand the reach of this law to affect all school buses that operate at a New York City public school. Now here's another limitation on this proposed bill. First, we just learned that it will only affect school buses that are subject to DOE contracts, and now they're saying it will only be school buses that do not use a closed crankcase ventilation system. So what is a closed crankcase ventilation system? A closed crankcase ventilation system is designed to capture gases that leak or blow by the piston rings, leaving the combustion chamber and enter the crankcase, which would otherwise enter the engine bay, polluting the atmosphere and passenger compartment of the vehicle. Blow-by contains a combination of soot or particulate matter, water vapor, unburned fuel, and exhaust byproducts such as carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and nitrous oxides, for example. The closed crankcase ventilation system captures these gases and recirculates them and unburned fuel back into the combustion chamber to be properly used in the combustion process and filtered by the exhaust system. The closed crankcase ventilation system also captures oil vapor, turning it back into fluid and diverting it back to the crankcase to lubricate the engines. Although these are mostly considered with diesel engines, most combustion engines could probably benefit from this type of system. Okay, now we're looking at the last section of the sentence, and it says shall be electric. So if we look back at this whole first sentence, it looks like starting in the school year of 2020 to 2021, the Department of Education is allowed to have two types of school buses under their contracts, and that would be either electric school buses or diesel powered school buses that use closed crankcase ventilation systems. But we know that there is much more to this bill summary, so let's continue moving forward and read it and see how the whole summary works together. Another part of the bill summary asks that electricity for such vehicles shall be generated on site. I'm not sure why this was added or contemplated. I mean, we don't require them to store diesel or propane or compressed natural gas on site. Most of them go to the gas station and fill up. So I don't know why you'd require this for electric school buses, that they must generate the electricity on site. I would clearly ask for this provision to be stricken, and it's actually not written anywhere in the law that I saw, and we'll go through that later. But this is a picture of a New York City bus depot for the school buses, and you can see it's totally packed. I don't know how they would generate enough electricity on site for all of these school buses. Even if you had solar panels and batteries, that would take up some of the space, so you'd have to move some school buses off site to find a new location, and they'd probably end up using some sort of diesel generator. That's probably the most cost-effective way to generate electricity for these school buses if you're going to have to do it on site, and that would totally negate any benefits that you would get from using electric school buses, because diesel generators are not as clean or efficient, and the regulations on those are a lot less than mobile vehicles. Plus, the fact that I think this would be used as a wedge to definitely break the law, because the economic effects of requiring them to put up solar panels or figure out a way to generate the electricity to power the school buses would be much more costly than for them to just go out and buy diesel or just pay for the electricity from Con Ed or wherever the power was generated. It definitely would be prohibitive to the benefits of getting an electric school bus to require the school bus companies to also produce the electricity. You could probably buy some offsets, maybe put solar panels in another location, but I don't think that's something that we should deal with in this bill. What we really need to be doing is fixing the grid, and that is how we should address this somewhere else, with a comprehensive look at how our grid works, making it a smarter grid, a more adaptive grid, and the school buses can be part of fixing this. If we do vehicle-to-grid technology, school buses could be a large way to store electricity, especially during the summer when most of the school buses are sitting idle anyway, and that's when we have peak demand. We can charge these school buses on the lots during the night, and then during the day when everyone needs their air conditioning and people are at work, we can take the electricity from the batteries in the school buses to help to buffer any peak times. And this could be a way to really make the grid adaptive and not have to put in peaker plants. We've seen it in Australia, where Tesla has put in a large battery facility to help to even out the grid there. But even before the battery was fully online, there was an incident where there was a spike and the batteries kicked in before the plant that they had put in place was to generate electricity could even react, and the batteries are instant on and smoothed out the power request so that no one lost power during that incident. And I think the school buses could do a similar effect during the summer months with vehicle-to-grid technology. The next sentence we're going to break down is, this local law further requires that all other school buses shall, after 10 years of use, be replaced by compressed natural gas, hybrid school buses, or all electric. This is just part of the sentence, but this piece has three components that I want to delve a little deeper into and break it apart so that we can get a better understanding of what's going on with the school bus regulations. The first part we're going to look into is, this local law further requires that all other school buses. So what are all other school buses in this case? Well, the first sentence talked about school buses that do not use a closed crankcase ventilation system, and all of those buses are now electric buses. So the all other buses must refer to the buses that do have closed crankcase ventilation systems and that are operating legally under the statute in 2020. Shall, after 10 years of use, be replaced signifies a significant change in the law. Currently, New York City allows a school bus to operate for 16 years before it has to be replaced. This last section talks about what school buses would be allowed after the 10 years of the school buses with the closed crankcase ventilation systems expire. So we're talking 2020 to 2030 time rate, or probably more 2031. You can now purchase buses that are powered by compressed natural gas, hybrid school buses, or all electric school buses. This does not talk about gasoline school buses, so I'm not sure if gasoline is ruled out. Gasoline has become more popular as the engines have become more powerful and more efficient. Propane has become another fuel source that's become popular with school bus manufacturers. They do provide quite a bit of energy, and I think the diesel buses can be adapted to use propane, or diesel engines can be adapted to use propane fairly easily. Propane is also considered less harmful for the environment. However, propane I don't believe is allowed in New York City due to containment issues. So I would like to see some clarification in this law about whether or not propane and gasoline school buses would be allowed within this period as replacements, because we'd consider that most of these school buses are diesel school buses. I would also like to see more clarification as to what is considered a hybrid school bus, and maybe some parameters as to maybe plug-in hybrid school buses only, and minimum requirements for mileage on pure electric propulsion. Not all hybrid school buses are made the same. I was able to catch this footage of a school bus charging its engine with an onboard diesel generator, I believe. They did not say exactly what they were using, but it didn't sound like the engine was on, and it would have to idle like this for about 45 minutes, releasing this particle-filled exhaust. You do not want this type of hybrid school buses. You need a school bus that can charge its batteries with plugs that you can plug into the wall and electricity that way. They're much cleaner, much more efficient, and we also have to have a minimum range for these hybrid school buses to get the best use out of them. Alright, so now we're going to start picking up the pace at which we're going through this bill summary, and now we've hit the year 2030, and it says that, and further provides that use of such compressed natural gas or hybrid school buses is limited to 10 years. So in the 2020 to 2030 period, we're phasing out the closed crankcase ventilation equipped diesel school buses and gasoline school buses. So we should have a mix of now compressed natural gas, hybrid, and pure electric school buses. But now in 2030, when those gasoline and compressed natural gas and hybrid school buses will start to phase out, as they will only have a 10-year lifespan. And such school buses must thereafter be replaced with all-electric, zero-emission school buses. So after 10 years of use on the compressed natural gas and the hybrid school buses, which were bought in the 2020 to 2030 period, are phased out between 2030 and 2040, those will be replaced with all-electric school buses, hopefully getting us to a full fleet of zero-emission electric school buses by the end of 2040. I would personally like to see that moved up quicker to the end of 2030 and skip the compressed natural gas and hybrid school buses, propane, gasoline, whatever else. I would like to see them all phased out during the 2020 to 2030 period, and that is what I would be pushing for. I believe that the transition can be made by the end of 2030 if New York City gets behind it and pushes for it. There's also electric school buses on the market today that are cost competitive over the 10 to 12 year life cycle of a school bus, currently 16-year life cycle under New York City law, and I believe that there won't be much benefit to prolonging the transition. And you can see these reasons and others in my video, top 5 reasons why New York needs to transition to electric school buses. There will be a link to that video at the end of this one if you have not seen it already. And as long as the particulate matter emissions of all such school buses does not exceed emission levels permitted in the most recent diesel emissions standards issued by the United States Environmental Protection Agency. Well, the last set of rules that were issued by the EPA was in 2007, and unfortunately I don't expect them to issue any more stringent regulations in the upcoming years, as they were looking at taking away the glider regulations on large semi-trucks, and they've been very protective of very old technology and diesel, coal, all that stuff. So I don't expect the EPA to look at the particulate matter emissions for school buses anytime in the near future. So let's take a look at how well we've done so far at the meeting the 2007. Now it's 2018, so we're talking at least 10 years now since the standards have been in place. Let's see how well New York City has done at meeting the standards set by the EPA for particulate matter. The chart you see before you here is a chart from DEP's Local Law 42 annual report for fiscal year 2016 to the New York City Council that they're required to do under the best available retrofit technology laws, and they do reporting as to the status of the school buses. These are only school buses that are type C and D that are used for general education, and it's very depressing news. The first line shows you the buses that have diesel particulate filters, and it shows that of the 1,881 buses that have them, only 995 of those buses actually meet the 2007 EPA standards for particulate matter. And then another thing that we've been talking about is the closed crankcase ventilation systems, and only 156 buses on the list have those closed crankcase ventilation systems, and none of them seem to meet the 2007 EPA standards for particulate matter, which also begs the question, is that only 156 buses that would, if this continues in 2020, would only 156 of the buses currently in operation be able to be used after 2020, and all of these other buses would have to be replaced with electric school buses, compressed natural gas, or hybrid school buses? Or are these buses eligible for closed crankcase ventilation systems, but they are not being used? There are also 41 buses that are in the process of some sort of retrofitting, and then there's 116 that are not required any kind of retrofitting, either because they're going out of operation or they meet some other exemption. I'm not sure. But the big takeaway here is we are at least 10 years away from the 2007 regulations, and only 995 of the 2,142 type C and D school buses in operation meet the 2007 EPA standards currently. So the last part of the last sentence deals with carbon emissions. The previous section dealt with particulate matter from diesel fuels, and the last section says, and the mileage meets the most recent corporate average fuel economy standards for compact and large trucks. So this would be no matter whether you're using compressed natural gas or a hybrid vehicle or diesel, gasoline, whatever the vehicle is being fueled by, it should meet the corporate average fuel economy standards. And the EPA has used this as a workaround to control carbon emissions. Since they have not been allowed to do it directly, they're using the fuel economy standards by stating how many miles per gallon you have to get, and the less fuel you burn per mile, the lower your carbon emissions. Now that we've broken down the summary, before moving on to the legislative text, let's do a little analysis of what the goals of the summary were and break them down into individual bullet points. The first bullet point is pretty clear. It wanted to add subdivision K to section 24-163.9 of the New York City Administrative Code. The goal of this section was to require that all school buses without closed crankcase ventilation systems were to become electric school buses by 2020. The summary also required that electricity to charge the electric school buses must be generated on site. The summary also called for a major change in age limitations for school buses so that after 2020, diesel-powered school buses with closed crankcase ventilation systems can only operate for 10 years from the date of manufacture. Then between 2020 and 2030, any diesel-powered school buses that have been retired can only be replaced by compressed natural gas, hybrid, or electric school buses. Any compressed natural gas or hybrid school buses bought between 2020 and 2040 can only operate for 10 years from the date of manufacture. For any CNG or hybrid school buses bought between 2020 and 2040, when they're replaced, they have to be replaced by all electric school buses. The summary also states that they're going to require all school buses must meet the latest United States Environmental Protection Agency's particulate matter standards. So whether it's a CNG bus, hybrid bus, diesel, electric, they all have to meet the same standards. The final goal stated in the summary is that all school buses must meet the latest corporate average fuel economy standards for compact and large trucks. Now we're going to turn over to the legislative text and see the amendments that they've made and see if they've met all of the goals as they've set out in the summary. Now that we've finished with the bill summary, we're going to look at the actual legislative text, and this is what the actual passed bill will look like when or if the bill is passed by the City Council. So the first section of 24.163.9 that they are going to amend is paragraph 1 of subdivision D, and it currently reads, or the proposal reads, no diesel fuel powered school bus of the designation type A bus or type B bus as set forth in subdivisions X and Y of section 720.1 of Title 17 of New York Codes, Rules and Regulations with an engine model year of 2007 or later, or that is utilizing a closed crankcase ventilation system pursuant to subdivision C of this section, and no diesel fuel powered school bus of designation type C bus or type D bus as set forth in subdivision Z and AA of section 720.1 of Title 17 of New York Codes, Rules and Regulations shall be used to fulfill any school bus contract beyond the end of the 16th in brackets underlined 10th year from the date of manufacture as noted on the vehicle registration, or the end of the school year in which that date falls, whichever is later. So before we get down into the breakdown of the legislative text, just wanted to point out where you see the 16th in brackets. Brackets is kind of, and underlines are the track changes for legislative amendments. So the only thing that's really being changed from the current reading of paragraph 1 of subdivision D is the 16th will be deleted as it's in brackets. Anything in brackets would be deleted from the text, and 10th, which is underlined, would be added. This would be new text inserted into the bill. Again, this section is a bit of a mouthful, so I'm going to break it down into smaller pieces, and first we're going to deal with the section that deals with type A or type B buses. One thing of note is that it talks about subdivisions X and Y of 720.1 of Title 17 of the New York Codes, Rules and Regulations. These are not the New York City regulations, these are New York State regulations. So a type A and type B bus would be determined by the New York State, not the city, so that whether you're in Albany, New York City, Poughkeepsie, anywhere throughout the state, all type A and type B buses would be considered the same type of bus. So before we get into a little bit more detail as to what this section requires for these diesel-powered fuel buses, let's figure out what a type A and a type B bus is. So the type A school bus is one of the shorter buses that you see quite commonly, especially here in New York. There are quite a few of them. but it's categorized as Type A bus is a bus with a conversion or body construction upon a van type or cutaway front section vehicle with a left side driver's door and designed to carry more than 10 persons. They also have two categories. The Type 1 has a gross vehicle weight rating of over 10,000 pounds, and Type 2 has a rating of 10,000 pounds or under. Visually, the Type B school bus is not much different than the Type A, and it doesn't seem, from vehicle sales that I've looked at, there's not a lot of Type B buses being sold, but the description is very close to the Type A. As we can see, the Type B is a bus with a conversion or body construction and installed upon a van or front section vehicle chassis or strip chassis with a gross vehicle weight rating of more than 10,000 pounds. So that's one distinction, is that it's only 10,000 pounds or more, and then it's also designed to carry more than 10 persons. But the chief differentiator is part of the engine is beneath and or behind the windshield and beside the driver's seat. The entrance door is behind the front wheels. So once we move to electric vehicles, I don't know if the designation of where the engine is or the motor in the case of the electric vehicle will have anything to do with whether it would be a Type A or Type B school bus. They'd probably all fall under the Type A categorization. I found it interesting that they have this language with an engine model year of 2007 or later. They don't have a corresponding language for Type C and D buses. And the only reason I could think of that they would include 2007 model year would be because the last EPA regulations for diesel powered vehicles was in 2007, so I imagine any engines coming out in 2007 or later should meet those standards. I was probably the thinking behind the council, or maybe they have regulations that deal with 2006 or earlier models, but that's the best explanation for why they signaled 2007, is that they figured that any engines made after that time would comply with the regulations set out by the EPA in 2007 for particulate matter. This next part of the sentence would address all engines no matter what year they were made, and it talks about or that is utilizing a closed crankcase ventilation system pursuant to subdivision C of this section. So they're talking about 24-163.9 subdivision C. So let's pull out some language from that to see when a closed crank ventilation system is required for Type A or B buses. Subdivision C of 163.9 is fairly long, but we can break it down quickly, and it states, notwithstanding subdivision B of this section, any diesel-fueled school bus of the designation Type A bus or Type B bus as set forth in subdivisions X and Y of Section 720.1 of Title 17 of New York Code Rules and Regulations with a pre-2007 engine model year shall utilize a closed crankcase ventilation system within 6 months of a finding by the United States Environmental Protection Agency or the California Air Resource Board that such technology is available for use in such bus and is available from the manufacturer, provided, however, that such technology shall not be required to be installed if such bus is scheduled to be retired within 12 months of such finding pursuant to the schedule set forth in paragraph 2 of subdivision D of this section. Notwithstanding subdivision B of this section means that if there's a conflict between subdivision B and subdivision C of 163.9, that subdivision C will control. But let's still take a quick look at subdivision B. There's only one section that is relevant at this point. Subdivision B2 states that 100% of diesel fuel school buses used to fulfill each school bus contract shall be equipped with such a closed crankcase ventilation system by September 1st of 2011. So now that we're in 2018 and this law will take effect in 2020, the other parts which dealt with years before 2011 is no longer relevant. Now we're going to get back to subdivision C, and this is a major chunk of it, which states that any diesel fuel powered school bus of the designation Type A bus or Type B bus as set forth in subdivisions X and Y of section 720.1 of Title 17 of New York Codes, Rules, and Regulations with a pre-2007 engine model year shall utilize a closed crankcase ventilation system within 6 months of a finding by the United States Environmental Protection Agency or the California Air Resource Board that such technology is available for use in such bus and is available from the manufacturer. So this was an exemption for the early years of these laws that allowed buses with a pre-2007 engine to operate and not use a closed crankcase ventilation system. I would like to see this removed, as we're now in 2018, and when this law will take effect, it'll be 2020. And if we also move the age restriction to only 10 years, then no bus with a 2007 or earlier model year will be acceptable, since you'd have to have a school bus purchased since 2010, and by that time all those school buses should be able to have a closed crankcase ventilation system, and if not, we should not be using those buses. The final part of subdivision C states that provided, however, that such technology shall not be required to be installed if such bus is scheduled to be retired within 12 months of such finding pursuant to schedule set forth in paragraph 2 of subdivision D of this section. I'm not going to go into subdivision D at this point because in 2020, when this law takes effect, all type A and type B school buses will be post 2007 engine model years and or will be required to have closed crankcase ventilation systems according to the statutes. I know we've been doing a little bit of hopping around, but now we're back to subdivision D, paragraph 1, which is actually the section that is being amended, even though we haven't gotten to the part that's being amended at this point. But it also says that no diesel fuel powered school bus of the designation type C bus or type D bus as set forth in subdivision Z and AA of section 720.1 of Title 17 of New York Code, Rules, and Regulations. So let's just clarify what the type C and D buses are in relation to the type A and B buses, which we were just talking about. So the type C school bus is probably what most people think of when they think of a school bus. It's the large school bus that carries typically 45 or more students, but in the categorization under the state regs, Class C bus is a bus with a body installed upon a flatback cowl chassis with a gross vehicle weight rating of more than 10,000 pounds and designed to carry more than 10 persons. All of the engine is in the front of the windshield and the entrance door is behind the front wheels. Again, engine placement is a part of the categorization, which will probably not be of importance once we move to all electric buses. The Class D school bus is quite distinctive in looks in comparison to the Class C. Instead of the kind of a hog nose, this has got a straight flat front. It's also the large bus, which is about the same seating capacity or maybe a little bit more than the type C school bus. So the type D is categorized legally as a bus with a body installed upon a chassis or unitized type construction, with the engine mounted in the front, midship, or rear with a gross vehicle weight rating of more than 10,000 pounds and designed to carry more than 10 persons. The engine may be behind the windshield and beside the driver's seat. It may be at the rear of the bus, behind the rear wheels, or midship between the front and rear axles. The entrance door is ahead of the front wheels. Okay, so now we're finally here at paragraph 1 of subdivision D, which states that shall be used to fulfill any school bus contract beyond the end of the 16th in brackets and then underline 10th year from the date of manufacture as noted on the vehicle registration, or the end of the school year in which the date falls, whichever is later. So this is the actual section, that part of the section that is being changed, and they're taking out 16th and making it 10th year, so that these buses, whether it's a type A, B, C, or D, that's a diesel school bus, can only be used for 10 years from the date of manufacture, unless it was manufactured after September 1st or September of that school year, in which case, if it's being used, it will go to the end of the school year that it is being used in operation, as long as it wasn't manufactured prior to the beginning of that school year. Now the changes are coming pretty fast. Now they're adding paragraph 3 to subdivision D, which does not currently exist, and it states, except for any all-electric zero-emission school buses, no non-diesel fuel-powered school bus shall be used to fulfill any school bus contract beyond the end of the 10th year from the date of manufacturer as noted on the vehicle registration, or the end of the school year in which that date falls, whichever is later. So this is what wasn't captured in D1. This will capture all of the compressed natural gas, hybrid, gasoline, school buses that are being used, and they have a 10-year limit, but this does not put a limit on retirement for electric school buses, which is a good thing, as we're not sure how long they can operate, but it looks like they can operate for at least 10 to 15 years, and as technology increases, this time limit would also increase as to how long they can be operational. Now, subdivision E is the last and final section that is going to be amended under this introduction number 1428, and it currently states school buses shall be replaced pursuant to subdivision D of this section with 1. A school bus meeting the most recent diesel engine emission standards issued by the United States Environmental Protection Agency, or 2. An all-electric gasoline-powered compressed natural gas or hybrid school bus, as long as the particulate matter emissions of such school bus do not exceed emission levels permitted in the most recent diesel engine emission standards issued by the United States Environmental Protection Agency, underline, provided that on or after September 1st of 2040, such school buses must be replaced with all-electric zero-emission school buses. The first part of Section E deals with diesel-powered school buses, and it says that those school buses shall be replaced pursuant to subdivision D, which I'm not going to go back over. That was a section that we went into detail on earlier in the video, and basically it talks about type A and B buses and that they were required to put on closed crankcase ventilation systems and gives a time period that should be done, and also type C and D buses, and that they can be used for up to now 10 years instead of 16. And then it goes on further to say a school bus meeting the most recent diesel engine emission standards issued by the United States Environmental Protection Agency. So any new school buses that are bought must meet the requirements by the EPA at the time that those buses are bought. But this does not say that those school buses cannot be used for any time period after 2020. It doesn't say that they must be retired by 2030, as we saw in the legislation summary. This section goes on further to say, or 2, an all-electric gasoline-powered compressed natural gas or hybrid school bus, as long as the particulate matter emissions of such school bus does not exceed emission levels permitted in the most recent diesel engine emission standards issued by the United States Environmental Protection Agency. So this, of course, states that you can use any one of these types of school buses to fulfill a DOE contract as long as they meet the diesel emission standards. But again, it doesn't say that they can only be used for 10 years and then must be replaced by electric school buses. Here we can see the last part of the sentence is underlined, and as we know, this is text that's being added, and it states, provided that on or after September 1st of 2040, such school buses must be replaced with all electric zero-emission school buses. Again, this does give a deadline as to when the school bus fleet should become all electric, but it doesn't say that the other school buses cannot be used up until 2039. So whether it's diesel, compressed natural gas, gasoline, or hybrid, it states that this law as it stands does not say that they cannot be used up until 2039, and then we go full electric starting in 2040. The last thing in this introduction bill is the implementation clause, which is pretty standard, and it says this local law takes effect 180 days after it becomes law, except that the Commissioner of Environmental Protection may take such measures as are necessary for its implementation, including the promulgation of rules prior to such date. So as long as this law is passed in early 2019, it can take effect before the 2019-2020 school year, but it'll probably really take effect for the 2020-2021 school year. And this allows the Environmental Protection Agency to promulgate any rules which would be needed to fill in the gaps to make the law more effective. But before we finish this review, or the legislative breakdown, I want to review the summary goals and what the legislation actually did to see how close they were to what they stated were their goals for this law. In reviewing the summary goals that I had pulled out earlier, we can see that the first goal was to add subdivision K to section 24-163.9 of the New York City Administrative Code. That was not done. There was no subdivision K added to the section under the bill. The next goal that they had in mind was by 2020, all school buses subject to DOE contracts that do not have closed crankcase ventilation systems must be replaced with electric school buses. This also was not done. Nothing in the statute says that the buses that do not have closed crankcase ventilation systems must be replaced by electric school buses. It allows it to be replaced by other diesel buses, gasoline buses, electric buses, hybrid buses, or compressed natural gas school buses. The next goal that they had in mind was electricity to charge the electric school buses must be generated on site. Again, nothing in the legislative text actually addressed creating electricity on site for the electric school buses, and I'm fine with that. I didn't think that provision was actually needed. And then the next provision they actually did pull through, which was the first one so far, is after 2020, diesel-powered school buses with CVTs can only operate for 10 years from the date of manufacture. The next thing we're looking at is between 2020 and 2030, diesel-powered school buses can only be replaced by compressed natural gas, hybrid, or electric school buses. None of the revisions actually addressed whether or not diesel-powered school buses would be obsolete after 2030, and it did not say that they couldn't be used up until 2040 when they required all the buses to become electric. And between 2020 and 2040, CNG and hybrid school buses can only operate for 10 years from the date of manufacture. That was addressed. And then after that, it was between 2020 and 2040, CNG and hybrid school buses can only be replaced by all electric school buses. This was also not addressed by any of the legislation amendments that they proposed. Nothing said that the hybrid and CNG buses after they were retired must be replaced by electric school buses. And the last two requirements, all school buses must meet the latest US EPA particulate matter standards, and all school buses must meet the latest corporate average fuel economy standards for compact and large trucks. Both of those commitments were upheld as they were already in the bill, and no changes were made to eliminate those requirements. But let's not end on a sour note. Let's look at what the bill actually did accomplish. Although no subdivision K was added, they did add paragraph 3 to the Administrative Code 24-163.9 subdivision D, which would be a significant addition because it would allow for electric school buses to operate without any age limit restriction. Another change is that by 2020, all school buses subject to Department of Education contracts that do not have closed crankcase ventilation systems must be replaced with an electric school bus or a compressed natural gas, gasoline, hybrid, or diesel school bus that meets the EPA particulate matter and corporate average fuel economy standards. After 2020, diesel, compressed natural gas, gasoline, or hybrid powered school buses can only operate for 10 years after the date of manufacture, which is a reduction from the current 16 years allowed by law. And finally, we get to the last and most significant change. After September 1st, 2040, all school buses used to fulfill DOE contracts must be all-electric, zero-emission school buses. I would rather see this law passed than nothing, but I am hoping to accelerate the timeline and get it moved up from 2040 to 2030. But to do this, we at the Electric School Bus Campaign are going to need your help. You can help by contacting your local city council representative and tell them that you support the move to electric school buses and you want them to make sure that introduction number 455 is promoted and voted on. You can visit our city council page link below to find the contact information for your city council representative. We have found it best to call their office or email them if you cannot visit their district office. Many of them are on social media, especially Twitter, but they do not usually respond to contact made on social media. But it is useful for knowing what your council member is doing. Everyone should also reach out to City Council Member Corey Johnson, who is the current speaker. If we're going to get it on the agenda, we're going to need his support. If you do not know what your city council district you belong to or who your council representative, we have a link to a website that can tell you who all of your representatives are, both federal, state, and local, based on your street address and zip code. We hope that you enjoyed the first video in our legislative breakdown series. Please leave any comments on future legislation you would like to see reviewed or how you feel we could make it better. We also plan on doing a video about how we would like to see the retrofitting and age limitations law changed to allow for all New York City school buses to be electric by 2030 instead of 2040 as the current bill proposes. We're going to do a breakdown on the New York City idling law, which also has a citizen complaint provision, which we will do a separate video on how to file a citizen's complaint and get paid. Currently, we have three ongoing litigations. One against Con Ed has been settled, and we expect the payment to be done shortly. And finally, we will also be comparing the New York City and New York State idling law to see how they compare on contrast. Thanks for watching the Electric School Bus Campaign's YouTube channel. If you're new to the channel or haven't done so yet, please hit that subscribe button. It only takes a second. To get notifications of our latest videos, hit the bell in the upper right hand corner. If you found the videos informative and entertaining and would like to help the channel to grow, don't forget to click that like button. But the best way to help us grow is to share these videos on your favorite social media site. You should also visit our website, electricschoolbuscampaign.org, for more information, or follow us on our social media websites, Twitter, Facebook, Google+, and Instagram. You'll find the links below in the comments section, or search Electric School Bus Campaign. To learn more about what's going on with the Electric School Bus Campaign or in the electric school bus world, choose one of our videos below. I hope you enjoy. Thanks again for watching, and continue to spread the word.